Hi, Jay. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you great. How are you?
Great. I'm fine.
Good, good. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the space. It's good to see everybody here on a Friday evening, for some of you anyway. Just as a general rule, Sahel, since this is the first time we're kind of hosting together, when you're not speaking, make sure you're muted. Otherwise, there's background noise. Cool. Thanks, man. All right, we're going to get going here in just a minute. But good to see everybody. Tia, Amanda, Michelle, good to see you. Mercy, Netta, ISO, it's late, but you're here. I appreciate you being here. All right, good to see everybody. So probably in about 10 seconds or so, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce the event. I'll give a quick intro to myself, and then Sahel, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we will get going. Okay, so this is part of our MentorMesh experience over theory product strategy session. And, this is an event series run by MentorMesh. We're going to be doing events for the next 100 days. So 5 days a week, we're going to be talking about everything to do with tech transition, product management, software engineering. This is really about mentorship. A lot of us wish we had mentors. Well, this is your opportunity to meet some, to learn from some, and to get to know the MentorMesh community. So for the next 100 days, pay attention to the events. You can go to mentormesh.io and see the full list of events. So please join if you haven't. The events are free, super informative, people from all across the industry. So definitely think you should take advantage of that. Also, for those that are able, join the MentorMesh Town Hall. It's going to be tomorrow at 9 a.m. PST, 12 noon EST. So if you can, come to the Town Hall. We're going to talk about what's happening with MentorMesh. We're going to talk about the new in-person tech conference that's coming up in June. And you'll get to meet some alumni, some people in the community, some of our leaders. It's a great event. We'll check in. We'll talk about wins, losses, especially if you're somebody that's looking to grow your career. It's a great time to come and visit and check out the town hall. All right, so for those that don't know me, my name is Jay Taylor. I'm the founder of mentormesh.io, which is a tech mentorship community. So we believe in helping people level up their careers by helping them share and understand that the knowledge that they have is valuable and that they are mentors too. Everybody wants a mentor, but a lot of people are very scared to be mentors. And so we're a community that supports each other. We share the knowledge that we have. We help each other level up, and we share events. One of the biggest and I think most impactful things you can do in your career is to know people in the industry that you want to join. But meeting people is hard. So hopefully MentorMesh will make that a little bit easier for you. And so hopefully you'll join. So again, my name is Jay. So my background is, I don't have a bachelor's degree, but I've been, senior levels at Microsoft, Salesforce, Peloton, Twitter, several other companies. And a lot of my background is very non-traditional. And I love to share tips and advice about things that really happen. Sometimes when you study something like product management, you're going to get a lot of textbook answers. That's theory, and that's great. But then when you talk to actual product leaders, you'll find out that sometimes the implementation of that is a little bit different than maybe what you expect. And so this is why I think that mentorship is such a powerful part of your education and your journey. Because also the more people you know, the more opportunities you are potentially opened up to. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. Sahel, do you want to give a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jay. Hi, folks. I am Sahil Gupta, and I have a background in sales and marketing at Maruti Suzuki, where I spent the first 9 years of my career. last year I transitioned to Google. I joined the Mentormesh community, frankly speaking, last year, but it was on and off. And this year I'm trying to become more regular. And this is the first event I'm hosting. Thanks, Jay, for that. And I'm also really interested in tech mentorship. So, Jay, should we kickstart?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay, Jay. So, I think before we take a stab at product strategy, one of the things I would like to really ask you is, how did you get into product management? What was your journey? As I think this is something a lot of people in today's call are trying to achieve apart from product strategy. And if you could elaborate a little bit on what your journey was, what are some of the things that you did that could be, replicated by the other folks who joined today?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Sahil. So it's a great question because I think it's something that a lot of people don't understand. And I'll talk more about this as we start to dive into product strategy. But I never actually chose product management as a career. I believe that all of us are problem solvers. Now, what role you play, whether that's design or engineering or product, we are all just trying to solve a problem, and we're just taking different roles to solve that problem. So product management wasn't something that I chose, but what happened is I actually started my career in engineering. So I did a lot of data stuff, data analytics and engineering, but I found myself always wanting to understand why. Why are we looking at this? Is this the right problem to solve? Did somebody validate that this is the right problem to solve, and why? Because I kind of wanted to check. And some of this is because as an engineering leader, you build something, you're told to build something, and so you go build it. And when you deploy it, sometimes nobody uses it. And then you start to wonder, okay, I put all this effort and nobody used it. So who was responsible for making sure that we were building the right thing? So as I started to progress in my career, I started to kind of be obsessed with why. Why are we doing this? What problem are we solving? And then after a while, and I started working for bigger tech companies, big companies told me that I was a product manager. I said, oh, okay, I'd never actually heard of that title before, but I did agree that I cared more about the strategy. I cared more about why we're doing this, and then ultimately what the solution was. And I was less concerned about how we implemented it, but I just wanted to make sure that they met our users' needs. And in bigger companies, that's called product management. And so that's kind of how I got into it. I had, an adjacent role in that I was leading engineering teams. But as I spoke to more people, it became pretty obvious that my inclination was always toward product management. And so that's how I got in. Now, as far as you asked, tips and stuff, I think we can definitely dive into that. But I'm still always going to double down on building relationships. Because the way I got my first product management job, like I was actually, well, it's kind of interesting. So my Microsoft job, I was a senior program manager, but at Microsoft at the time, they didn't differentiate between program and product management. And so when I first got that job, the hiring manager told me it was product. So technically you could say that was my first job. But to be honest, when I got the job, it was definitely program management. There's very little product in there. It was definitely more program management. So my actual first legit product management job was when I was a director of product at Salesforce. And this is kind of ties into the post I had earlier today where I said, well, your first job in product doesn't have to be junior. Mine, I was a director, my first product job. But the reason that could work is for a couple of reasons. So number one, my adjacent experience was relevant. So I talk a lot about that, right? When you transition to an area that values your prior experience. So when I was a director of product, it was for a data platform product, which I came from an engineering background with a lot of data products. And so when I went to product management, they valued that as a part of my history. And so I got to do product management there. But if you think about why I was hired, it was because I had previously worked with the hiring manager at Microsoft, and I had built a good reputation with her at Microsoft. So when she went to run a team at Salesforce, as she's building out her team, as any leader builds out their team, they have to think about, okay, what do I need? What gaps do I have? who do I know? I talk a lot about this. I had always kept in contact with her, and I reached out to her just to see how she was doing. And this is what I mean. You don't even have to ask for jobs. Just keep in contact with people, be a good person and help where you can. And then she asked me if I would be interested. And so that's how I got my first product management job. And what's funny about that too, and this is again, relationship building. You can't go into relationships thinking of it as transactional, because actually what happened is that she did offer me a job potentially. She was telling me about it, and then she ghosted me for like 6 months. And it's easy to look at that situation and say, get really upset because, she said she was gonna, and then she didn't. And then she stopped replying. But it was never about that. It should never be about what you can get out of a relationship. So I let it go. I let some time go by. And then maybe 6 months later, I just checked in and said, hey, haven't heard from you. I'm assuming that role, was no longer there. And she said, she apologized. She said that she lost funding for that role, but then she had another one. So she was glad that I came back. And then that ended up being the role that I applied for and transferred to Salesforce. It's a lot of lessons in that, but to be honest, product, we'll talk more about what it is, but building good relationships, it's everything. It is absolutely everything. Having a good reputation, showing your work ethic is a big part of it.
So nice. So building your reputation is one key thing, that I take away. Jay, just a little sidestep, what I understand from your journey is that you did not really categorically go after product management. It was you loved solving problems and you transitioned. But now product management has become, this larger than life role that all people want, they want. But sometimes we've also heard, people when they join the role, maybe they don't enjoy it so much. Is there a way people can evaluate whether they really want to be in product or not?
That's an awesome question. So thank you, Sahel. I think one of the things to keep in mind is that every company is going to have their own culture. So, and this is why a lot of times too, when I think about opportunities, you really should think about the team that you're joining and the company that you're joining, because every company has their own definition of what product is, and even the way you run product is going to be different. Like being a product manager for a big company like Salesforce or Microsoft is very different than at a startup. So at a startup, you're going to have less resources, maybe more time constraints. It's going to be a lot more serious because you may not have any money for that reason, right? So you got to be profitable. So there's a little bit more pressure. But you can, for the most part, move faster. And there's a lot of value and fun in doing that because you can kind of maybe work one-on-one with your engineering leads and really crank stuff out. And that's a lot of fun. But then that same type of role, you do that at Salesforce or a Microsoft, it's very, very different. I would argue that the majority of your role is about collaboration and alignment, which feels less like building features and more like building relationships. And so if you are all excited about product and you think you're going to build all these great features, and then you work for a big company and they're like, you know what? Nobody wants to work with you. And you realize that that's your biggest hurdle, is that nobody wants to work with you. Nobody cares about your product. And so now you realize that, okay, how do I get people to listen to me? And you realize that it's more about relationship building and alignment, which was not necessarily why you chose product, maybe, right? So I think understanding companies, understanding that companies are different, even size of companies, and even the type of product that you have, right? If you're a product manager for a Peloton bike, you're managing hardware, software, supply chain. There's a lot that's involved in that. It's very different than being a product manager for the Twitter homepage, right? So some of the fundamentals might exist, but the way you go about it, the way you do your research, the types of stakeholders that you have, it's going to be a very different experience. So product management is definitely a strategic leadership role, and it's going to feel different depending on the company that you're at. But remember that the bigger the company, the more likelihood that a lot of your day-to-day is going to be relationship building.
I think that's a good distinction between what is product management at a startup what is product management at an established company like Google. Uh, I think one of the key constituents of product management is product strategy. And the fact that you've worked both at Peloton and Twitter, could you get some insight into how does strategy vary in big versus small company, and what really is strategy? What are the key constituents that define, okay, these are 3 to 4 things that are the, say, a framework of a strategy?
Yeah, so I think a lot of this has to do with the way that you think and problem solve. And I try to explain product management to people, and you got to remember that, again, product management is a strategic leadership role. But before we get into that, let's define what a product is, because I think that's something that people get confused too. A product doesn't have to be a thing. It doesn't have to be a piece of software that you're shipping. It's used much more broadly in the world and in the workforce. Think of a product as any service or experience that you are responsible for. So yeah, it might be the Twitter homepage, or it could be onboarding experience of a specific software. So it may be several pages. It may be, portions of different workflows all together in a single experience. Because when you think about onboarding might have a combination of email and software and hardware. There's a lot of stuff that's involved in onboarding. So think of product as more broad. Any service or experience that you own, right? It's a strategic leadership role. So your job, you are responsible for the success of that product or service, whatever that means, right? Depending on what industry you're in or what company you're in, the way that you go about making your product successful might be different. So product is responsible for why. Why are we building this, and what are we building? What is the problem that we're solving? Why is it important? Who is it important to? What can we build to help solve this problem? And is it the right problem to solve? Is it the right time to solve? Who are the competitors? Does it align with our company mission and goals? What does the competition look like? What are their competitive advantages? What's our unique value proposition, right? What world events are happening that could potentially push and maneuver the success of this product? COVID is a perfect example. It was something that propelled many, many products and also declined several other products, right? What's our pricing strategy? What are our competitors price for this? What are consumers willing to pay? All these questions, product is the one that leads the discovery and research. Now, as a product manager, your job is not to always know the answers to this. And I think that's the good news. That's why you shouldn't be scared of a product role. But understand the gravity and the weight of it. It's a big role. So, but you have a team. You've got engineering leaders. You've got design leaders. You've got marketers potentially. You've got salespeople. Depending on the company that you're in, you've got a lot of people and a lot of resources to help you figure out what that strategy is, right? So, and this is where I say it goes back to collaboration. A lot of people, when they go into product, they have this kind of grand notion that they need to come up with some spectacular idea by themselves in the corner and then go pioneer it across the company. When the reality is, when you start to understand people and working and relationships, that's probably not the best way to go about building a product, because you're not going to know everything. So talk to your partners, build relationships. A lot of times your stakeholders will shoot your product idea down simply because they don't like you. And that sounds silly, but that's human nature. If you don't like someone, and for whatever reason, you listen to them with a filter. So much of product and leadership in general is about trying to remove that filter and get people to listen to your idea. But one part of that is listening to theirs. And I would even modify what I just said. It's not even your idea. The goal is to build a product strategy for the company that we all maneuver together on. If you want that type of relationship, that's collaboration, that's people, right? So, I'll talk a little bit more about how I've done this in the past, but right now, understanding that product is a heavy collaboration role and that it's your responsibility to answer these questions, that's what strategy is. Strategy is having a very thoughtful reason as to why we're moving forward and clearly defining where we're going, and and making that clear to everybody that's involved. Because if you think about the number of teams that are involved in these types of decisions, especially, again, like companies like Google and Microsoft, we're talking about massive ships that need to be moved in order to move your product forward. So, those are kind of a lot of the things that I would say you'd have to think about.
Jay, just one add-on question. When you spoke about product management, you said this is a role that requires great collaboration. And at the same time, I think it will also require holding people responsible or accountable. And that sometimes gets in the way of collaboration. So how do you really, balance both of them? That being the person that they like to work with, also you holding them accountable at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good question, because as a product manager, most of the time, 99% of the time, you are building nothing, right? You have a dependency on your engineering teams, your design teams to deliver, and if they don't deliver, you can't deliver as a product manager. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this. In some cultures, and I won't call these companies out, they love to throw people under the bus. And they would argue that that is effective. And to some extent, if your goal is just to get people to move, throwing them under the bus publicly, humiliating them and shaming them, will that make them move faster? Okay, sure. But that's very, very short-sighted, right? So they might move faster, but they're not going to enjoy you or the job. So there's long-term negative effects of that type of approach. So there's people out here that will show and suggest that type of aggressive approach, but I don't think it's necessary. I believe in certain servant leadership. I think you can get good results by being transparent and fair. So one of the things that I do is and I think is also very important in product management, is transparency. So every company has their own kind of way of sharing responsibility and making sure people are aware. Now, when what you're doing is transparent, when the plan is transparent, when the schedule is transparent, everybody knows it and everybody is aware of the dependencies, it naturally creates a strong sense of accountability, because we all agreed to this plan, or at least we committed to it. Even if we didn't agree, hopefully we've built the plan, we've shared the plan, we've disseminated the plan, all reviewed it, had an opportunity to comment or not, and we're all aware of the mutual commitment to serving our customers, right? So, depending on the culture of your company, maybe that's an email that goes out, weekly. Maybe it's a Slack channel. Maybe it's a monthly product review. It really depends on the type of company, because I've had to do it all. Like Microsoft is very email heavy. At Peloton, we did monthly roadmap reviews. At Twitter, everything was on Slack. So that's why I say it matters on your company and the way that they communicate. So you have to kind of know that. But if everybody's aware and there's some mutual level of commitment, then everybody knows what they're accountable for. So when we miss something, the fact that we missed, it's not calling people out. It's just, as a group, we are accountable for the success of this product. And because there's dependencies that exist, I feel that transparency kind of helps that. But as a product person, if I know that there are critical timelines that are coming up, I'll check in. I'll check in with people. I'll see if they need resources, how, do they feel like they're going to hit those dates. Part of product is realizing also like what's really important, a part of your MVP, and what's not. And at the same time, even being able to help answer questions like, can we push this date out? What if we had to change scope so that we could deliver on time? What's more important? The quality, the scope, the timeliness, all of that stuff is subjective. The good news about SaaS software is that a lot of times we can ship software that's not 100% ready, and that's okay. People kind of expect it to be a little janky at first, so you get a little bit of leeway, and there are things that you can fix after launch nowadays. Obviously, that didn't used to be the case before. So these are the kind of things that I would consider, and I think transparency, honesty, being upfront, and telling people too, like we have to hit this date. So if you can't hit this date, like, you got to let me know, and let me find out if I can get you more resources, or as you're building relationships with people, like, be honest. Don't tell me you can if you can't, because we're a team here, So I think transparency, honesty is going to be the key to doing that, and understanding that your intention, make sure your intention with your teammates is clear, that the goal is not win at all cost. The goal is about sustainable execution, which requires good relationships. So as long as they understand your motive, most people, they want to do good work. That's why they work for companies like this. So be transparent, be honest, be upfront. I think that's the key.
Jay, one more thing, you touched upon product strategy, but can you also give a light into what are the different approaches you have used to build the product strategies for different companies you have worked at? And and how does the role of a PM change in terms of in terms of product strategy as it grows? Like you are a program manager at Microsoft, then you shifted to Salesforce, then you went to Peloton, and increase in seniority. So, what work changes as in view of product strategy?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So I'll talk about a little bit about how I approach it. But what's interesting that I'll just call out at the beginning of this is that the more senior you get, the more leadership focused your role becomes, the more it starts to feel like program management, which is kind of funny, right? Because you're in product. Maybe you wanted to build product. But if you have a team of product managers and that team gets bigger, guess what? You're not doing the product management anymore. You are more of a mentor, which is why I always say, mentorship is leadership, because all of these product managers that are under your charge, they're coming to you. They've built the strategy. They're asking for your advice. They want your opinion. And your job as a strategic leader is to make sure that the product across all your PMs are telling a coherent story, right? But even the things that you build as a leader, as a director and a senior director and a VP of product starts to feel a lot like program management, which is why a lot of times you will hear me blend them together. Product might be the strategic lens, but leadership is about getting people to work well together, which feels a lot like program management. So you can't ignore that. So kind of going back to the way that I would approach it. So most of the time when you're building a product, let's say you go get a job, the product already probably exists. Okay, sometimes it's greenfield, so you get to build it from scratch. That's always a lot of fun. But I would say the majority of the time, the product probably already exists. Maybe you're building a brand new feature, but the product itself already exists. So my approach is a very human and personal approach. It's not exactly what you think. You think that maybe I go into a corner again and I start building something and just trying to push my ideas. That's not it at all. Especially when you're brand new to a company, that first 90 days, you got to build trust. That's the number one thing you got to do. Because if nobody trusts you, they're not going to execute on your idea. So I start with stakeholders. Know who your team is. Know your team. Know your stakeholders. Understand the constraints. Understand timelines. But your focus is to build relationship and trust. Because that trust is that's going to carry your career. That's going to carry the longevity of your leadership role. That's what matters the most. So one of the things you're going to deal with is time, because you can't meet with everyone all the time, right? The most effective way to build a relationship most of the time is a one-on-one conversation. But it's not reasonable for you to have one-on-one conversations with everyone, right? So part of this is figuring out who your primary decision makers are, because not everybody has the same impact or influence. So knowing who those people are and setting up the right type of cadence to meet with them, because they're going to have limited time too. They may not be able to meet with you weekly, monthly, or even quarterly. They may prefer an email, but you got to figure out what those touch points are and who your primary stakeholders are. The next thing I'll take a look at is try to understand context. Why are we where we are? Okay, what constraints do we have? What decisions were made in the past? This is super important for your own self, because your job as a product manager is to have a perspective. Your job is to have an opinion. Your job is to take all of these inputs and come up with some ideas and help facilitate creating a fantastic experience or product, right? You have to understand context. Why are we here? A lot of people will join companies and they start complaining immediately about, oh, why did we build it this way? That's so stupid. Why did we do? Okay, because a lot of these companies are building and scaling over time. There are reasons why things are the way they are. So understand those constraints. And what's great about that is if you ask people, they will tell you. And when they tell you and you listen, without disputing and criticizing, just listen, you're building trust. Because if they understand that you understand context, they're more likely to listen to you if you have a new idea because you've heard them. So understand context, understand your stakeholders, and then understand, I talked a little bit about this already, but you have to figure out what your working model is. Every company is different. You got to be transparent. Whatever you're building, whatever product strategy that is, if your company uses product strategy documents, if they use different types of strategic docs, make sure you know what those are. Make sure the cadence that you know that people are writing and reviewing those documents. Do we have review sessions? Are they doing email? Because you have to adapt to your company communication style. Once you have a little bit of clout, maybe you can kind of change that, but at the beginning, at least understand where you are before you try to change it. So creating that customer feedback loop is another thing too. There's internal customers, there's external customers. How do I get those inputs to me? I need to know what my stakeholders think. I need to know what my customers think. How do I build that feedback loop so that I'm constantly able to evolve my perspective, which helps me build better products? So this is when our customers are our stakeholders, leadership, peers, dependent teams, and our actual users of the platform. So how do you build those customer success loops as part of it? And I got a lot here, so so bear with me. So, I'll try to wrap this up here in a second. And I think getting back to like the core of what you do in product, there's a couple of things that I would add to that too. Yes, you own the product strategy, but your job is to add clarity. What are we doing? Add focus. Why are we doing it, right? And define what success looks like. Because if you get there, how do you know that you're successful, right? If you don't know what success looks like, it's hard to know that you're there. If you're moving in the right direction, how do you know that? What are the signals, triggers, data, metrics that you look at that hint that you're going in the right direction? Because you should always be thinking about evolving and moving forward. There is no destination. The destination is only improvement and growth, always, right? And in order to do that, you have to understand the problem that you're trying to solve really well. And the people that understand that really well are likely your customers. Now, they may not know exactly how to solution the problem, but they understand the problem very well. So again, to that feedback loop, surveys, usage data, trends in behavior, looking at support tickets, what are people complaining about? And even proactively building community for your product so you can talk to people, find community advocates. What are your account managers saying? What are your developer relation people saying, right? Identify the hot topics and concerns. So your job is to create that customer feedback loop so that you can make an informed decision.
Okay, Jay, that was, I think, a pretty elaborate answer. Do you think we should open to the audience? We should take questions from them now?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So I obviously I can talk forever, but I would love to. Yeah, let's invite some people on stage. We got one hand. I'll invite some folks. But if anybody's interested in coming, would love to have you up here. And I think maybe as we wait for our volunteers, I'm going to let this gentleman up here. I wanted to, again, we're kind of at the halfway point here.
Hello.
I wanted to. Oh.
Good evening, house. Good evening, house. I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you for the privilege, Sir Jay and Sir Gupta. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Sorry. I'm very, very happy to be here. And thank you so much. I've listened even though I was late during the meeting. I'm not a product designer or a product strategist, but I was able to get one or two things. So at some point, I got interested and I was kind of liking what you are saying and the tips you are giving. Even at that, I said, okay, like us that are just new pies, that are just catching interest in it, what do you have to tell us? Like, how do we go about it as a beginner? Someone that is just, out of this, this can be a change of career. It can be an opener to us who are just new to the system. So it might trigger us to go into it deeper. So what do you have to, what do you advise for someone that wants to start as a beginner? Or what's the first step to take or something like that? So I just want to hear your advice. Sorry, I'm not a product strategist like I just said earlier. Into LinkedIn optimization and CV writing and other academic professional resume writing. So if you can guide me through just few things that for beginners to know, one or two. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for coming on stage. Appreciate you being here. Now, what's interesting about that question is that the way that I would answer it is the same regardless of whether you're in product or any role. I think, and I kind of said this earlier, and you might have missed it, but the most important thing you can do for your career is to know people in the industry that have the job that you think that you want. So that's one of the reasons why I created Mentor Meshes, because I recognize that that's a very hard thing to do. So if you're curious about product management, my advice is to know a lot of product managers. Ask specific questions about product management and talk to people and ask them what it's like, like what you're doing right now. Like that's exactly what you do.
Yes.
I believe that the more people you know, the more opportunities will naturally start to show up. But there's a lot of free information out there that will tell you the basic principles of what product management is. But product, remember, is a leadership role. So sometimes it's really about you gaining perspective. So pick an area that you're interested in. And study it. Know it better than anyone else. And when I say area, I don't mean like technical area. I don't even mean product management. I mean like pick a problem that you want to solve and dive into it. Like what's a problem that you deal with every day that you wish that was different? Figure out what people in the world are doing to deal with this problem now. Why is it such a pain? Why isn't it solved? What companies are trying to solve that problem? So if you pick a domain and you dive in, what you're doing is you're gaining perspective. Another big, as you're doing that too, like what you do is you share what you're learning on LinkedIn. People that are in that domain will start to notice you, and if you do this right, they'll potentially start to help you. So building relationships with people and picking an area to dive into for product, I think is what you can do first.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I've just learned something that it serves to almost every field. So I will grow. I'll grow from here. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here.
Jay, as we invite more people, we would like to take a moment to talk more about the town hall that is coming later, and also a little bit about Mentor Mesh.
Yeah. So just give me 1 second here. Okay, so yes, I would love to invite everybody to the town hall. It's going to be tomorrow at 9 a.m. PST. The town hall is something we do every so often, usually about quarterly. We kind of meet together as a community, our alumni. We all get together and we kind of talk about what's new in Mentor Mesh. We talk about new programs, new events that are happening, and we check in with each other. So much of career growth is about having a network of people that care about your growth. And so that's what Mentor Mesh is all about. So the town hall, we're actually going to be talking a lot about the tech conference that we're going to be having in June. So if you're interested in learning more about what that means, in my experience in tech, some conferences can be one of the most powerful things that you can attend that will help you build incredible relationships with people. So to give you an example, like I was a speaker at a conference called Afrotech a couple of years ago. And because of that talk that I gave, I met what ended up being most of the product team at LinkedIn, which was pretty incredible. So in my talk, I was talking about the value of LinkedIn, about how to level up your career. People on LinkedIn were there, and wanted me to come over and chat with them. So I went and chatted with them, and then they introduced me to one of their VPs that was there, and I met him. I had one-on-ones with him. He introduced me to other VPs at LinkedIn, who introduced me to directors at LinkedIn. And all of a sudden, I'm connected to so many people at LinkedIn simply because I went to a conference and I shared the knowledge that I had. So, even coming to conferences, meeting people, contributing, sharing, helping people, the industry will notice you. And because of that, you'll start to be introduced to other people. And that's only one example. So MentorMesh, we're going to be doing our conference. I think what's going to be unique about our MentorMesh conference is that the focus of the conference is you. So if you were going to go to, like, let's say AWS reInvent, that's a pretty cool conference, but there's like 50,000 people there. And what is the topic of the conference? Well, they're going to teach you about AWS. They're trying to sell you AWS services, right? Well, MentorMesh is about you. This is about your personal growth. It's about connecting you with as many mentors as possible. It's about you sharing the knowledge that you have, and the people that show up there are actively interested in your success. That's the vibe of MentorMesh, and that's what our conferences are going to look like. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, come to the town hall tomorrow and learn more about it. And if you're not part of MentorMesh, mentormesh.io, it's a free community. So give it a second and come check it out.
We have another question from Michelle J. If you could also just invite her. Hi, Michelle.
Yes, I did. Welcome, Michelle. She is a longtime MentorMesh instructor and member. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Jay. Hope everyone's day is going so well, and hope everyone has a good weekend. My question, and actually before I start that, on a side note, everyone on Microsoft doesn't really use emails anymore. We use Microsoft Teams now. So that's an interesting change there. My question is, I know you talked about how product management is kind of about mentorship. And in your roles as like managing other product managers, what do you do when someone underneath or an associate of yours is struggling? What step do you take? I'm curious to hear what your opinions are on that.
So when you say associate, do you mean somebody that reports to me or a colleague?
Yes. I would say it reports to you, yes.
I just fire them. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So let me see. So I've had this happen before. I don't want to be too personal just in case some of these people show up here. But what I will say is, so when somebody's not performing well, I think it's important to understand that performing well is relative. Sometimes they think they're doing great. Sometimes they don't know what the goals are, and so they're pursuing the wrong thing. Sometimes they don't realize the way they're coming across. There's a lot of reasons why somebody could be perceived as not doing well. So the first thing I do is make sure that they're really clear on expectations, right? Like, what does success look like, right? So they should know whether or not they're doing well or not. So I would have a conversation with them and make sure it's really clear, like, that they understand what is their job and what is not their job. And then I want to make sure that there isn't something that I'm not providing that's causing the problem. And maybe it might even be the first thing. Maybe they're not clear what's important for them to do. Maybe I haven't made that clear for them. So I need to make sure that I'm not the problem. I need to make sure that resourcing is not the problem, because maybe they're overworked. Maybe they're not clear. Maybe they need help. And they're just not good at letting you know that. So you start kind of backtracking and making sure that this is not circumstantial. Like it's that there isn't something that could be fixed or easily fixed that could improve whatever the perceived performance problem is. Because I think this is going to be different depending on the person and the perceived problem. But after that, let's say that we've kind of established that, I've kind of let them know what's going on and kind of expectations, and they're clear and they say everything's fine. I might work with them a little bit more hands-on just to see how they work through things and how they problem solve stuff. And my goal is to help them be successful. But it's also possible that this is just not the right job for them, and I want them to be honest enough with me to tell me that maybe this is not, like, again, I think Sahil brought this up. Maybe product is not what they thought it was, and they realize they actually don't like it. I think people should be able to tell their manager that. And I would like to say that I'm one of those managers you can say that to, because I'm going to help you transition, whatever that means. I've had people that reported to me, I remember at a couple of different companies, where one of them was perceived to be a project manager because she had a PMP certification. So everyone thought, since she put it next to her name, that she was a good project manager. When reality is she actually didn't like project management at all. And she couldn't understand why everyone kept making her project manage things. And I said, well, it's because you put it on your title. You're kind of telling people that that's what you're good at. But after we kind of talked more about it, she was actually much more better of an analyst. She loved to dive deep into data. She loved to analyze things, but project management wasn't her jam. So all we had to do was I had to know that. And then we started to shift roles and responsibilities, and I started to help position her to do better in her role. And that really was it is. It was the wrong role for her. And I think that's perfectly okay. So that's what I would do, is I make sure, is it the role that's challenging? Are there constraints that are bothering you? And then finally, I've had situations where literally the person just did not want to be here. And that's okay too. Maybe the pace we're going is not where they want to go, or they want to go in a different direction. That is totally okay too. But I have we've got objectives. I've got a team to run. I'm happy to help you transition to something different. But because you're in this role, there's certain things you got to do, and you have to choose whether or not that's important to you or not. So I try my best to be a supportive manager, but at the same time, just make sure things are really clear and give people an opportunity to make a choice.
Thanks, Jay. We also have another question from Yashasvi. If you could add her also.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure that this question will go 100% with the product strategy, but when Jay, you were telling about the workflow of the product or a company who has a product architecture built earlier, and then there might be a reason that how it constructed, right? How we create that product workflow. So, what strategy should we have to follow when we found that after maybe 5 years that this workflow is not exactly working what we need now as per the business requirement? So what we have for the product delivers, the database architecture is not according to what it should be, but we have a huge huge block of database that the tables have trillions of data. There's so much of data, and it can't be changed now. So understanding the context of the product, like the workflow, how it was created earlier, that is fine. But what product strategy should be should be in our mind now to modify this workflow for the upcoming business requirement to fulfill the delivers. Again, I'm sorry if I'm it's not the part of product strategy, but this is somewhere it is inclined towards, because when we see how we deliver the product, so in that case we have one is the business objective, where we gather the information and we design a model and everything. But there is one part where we have the delivers, where we have to implement a product workflow on there. So I think that might be relatable.
Yeah. So it kind of depends a little bit. I'd have to understand probably more about your specific scenario. But what I'll say generally is, especially if you're building something and the architecture is not right and you need to convince someone, part of the question would be, who needs to say yes in order for this to move forward? So for instance, if there's a major architectural change that needs to happen, part of it is again going back to clarity, right? What is the specific value add? And you might have to pioneer that idea. It's like, we can't do this, and here's why. Here are the constraints. And so this is what needs to change in order for us to move forward. And a lot of times it's about focusing on the value of what that change will be, because there might be a tax, right? Like there's There's work that we have to do. There's work that's potentially lost. But the reality is, in the software world, there is no software that lasts forever. Every piece of software needs to be upgraded and changed every so often. There's no way around that. But I think, especially if it's business stakeholders that you're trying to convince, it matters the audience that you're talking to, right? The business stakeholders, they care about value, right? Speed to value. They care about whatever data insights they have, and they need to clearly understand the value of making this architecture change. They may not care about the technical details as to why it's slower. And let me give you an example. So sometimes in big platform teams, we might have conversations whether or not we're going to be running a big monolithic code base, or do we break up our monolith and start having small microservices? But those are potentially really big architectural changes. When I was at Peloton, telling the business people that, hey, we got to derail and like split up our code base and work on this massive multi-year project that's going to break up and slow down work. If you just tell that to business stakeholders, they'll be like, why do we need to do this? It's working just fine. What are you talking about? Why would we do that? The way we had to pitch that towards the users was not about the work that had to be done, but the value that they would get after it was implemented and why it was important. And in this particular case, the problem that we had at Peloton was that it had to do with deployments. So if you want to innovate quickly, you need to be able to deploy often. But when you have a huge monolithic code base, sometimes that's really hard, because now anytime there's a small change, you have to deploy everything, which can be complicated if you're not very good at deployments. So by breaking it up, it gives you the ability to deploy portions of the code at a time, and different teams can innovate separately. Now, that obviously creates other issues that you have to be aware of, right? But talking about that value add to the business is what helped them to understand why it was important for us to do. So it was like, okay, here's the business impact and why you should care that we do this. So I guess one question I would have for you then is, who is the person that needs to be convinced? Is it the business owners, business users?
Yes, the business owners.
Yeah, so you have to focus on the value of the change, because they may not care. They don't care if it's a big database or a small database. They care about the results that they're getting. So you have to speak it in a language that they understand, where they agree that it's worth the sacrifice, whatever that is. And as long as you speak to their values, I think that's always true. Anytime you talk to anyone about anything, you talk to them with their lens. You try to understand what they care about and see if there's a bridge between what you want to do and what they care about. And if you can bring that together, it's a lot easier to get a yes.
Okay. Thanks, Jay. Thank you so much. Actually, I'm about to do that on Monday. I was just making sure that if I'm doing this kind of thing, then that would be correct, or whether I'm missing something. And fortunately, this live session comes up. So that is really helpful. Thank you.
Folks, we can still have a couple of questions. So if anybody has a question, please raise your hand.
Or you could just come up and say hi. Davina,
Yep.
John-Luc, I see you. Niku, Tia, good to see you. All right.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm a little bit nervous to be up here, but I do have a question for you, Jay. So you talk a lot about the fact that if you want to get into product, go build a product. So what advice would you give to someone who has a lot of different product ideas and is very driven about entrepreneurship, but has no management experience, but also feels like naturally inclined towards leadership?
Yeah. Well, it's good to see you, Tia. Thank you for coming up here.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. So I love the question, and I hope you're talking about yourself. Being an entrepreneur and being in product management is really closely related. I would tell that person to go build a product and don't worry about management experience. It's funny because I remember even Mark Zuckerberg said this, you don't even need experience to be successful, which is really interesting because it's true to some extent, right? You get the experience by going and doing it. I think the problem that people deal with is that they are afraid of failure. They think there's all these things I don't know, so what if I try and I fail? That's okay. Please fail. Because by going out and trying something and failing, you will gain perspective, right? Now you'll know, you'll kind of think to yourself what worked. Maybe you'll be able to figure out why it didn't work. You get feedback from other people, obviously joining communities like MentorMesh, posting on communities like LinkedIn and Twitter. You can get even more perspective. A lot of people will get really cagey with their ideas and they're like, I don't want to share the idea. Well, why not? It's not the idea that's likely going to change the world. It's the execution of that idea. So when you think about the types of technologies that have changed the world, a lot of times it's not the first implementation of that technology. It's usually fifth or sixth, or somebody else did a better job of execution, and that is why their product was successful, right? So like Facebook is not the first social media platform. For those that are old enough, MySpace was out here, and there were some other ones before that, but Facebook, took over the market and became one of the largest platforms in the world, right? So don't worry about failing. Go fail, because failure gives you perspective and it helps you deal with future anxieties. Because arguably when you get hired, we are hiring you for your failures. We don't want somebody that just read it in a book but has never tried it. We want you to try. We want you to fail. We want to hear about those failures. We want to know how you dealt with those failures. So I would say dive deep into a problem that you want to solve. Google it. Talk to people that are in the domain, right? Meet people that know something about it. Learn about it. Gain perspective about it. Because if you do that, you might find that you might be one of the only people that have truly dove into that area. And if you post about it, if you share what you're learning, if you're meeting people in that problem space, you'll start to build connections. You'll naturally get mentorship. Hopefully you'll be able to find maybe a developer that wants to work with you. They don't even have to be senior at all. They can be a junior developer that wants to try stuff out, just like you. But so by kind of putting yourself out there, people will start to see you and start to care about your journey. So being an entrepreneur, to me, especially in product, you kind of have to have that mentality because you are defining products for customers. You got to be willing to go out there and try and fail, because you're going to fail more than you're going to succeed. That's part of product too that people don't realize. You're going to launch a lot of things that don't work, but that's part of the deal.
All right. Yeah, I was talking about myself when I asked that question, but thank you for the advice. I appreciate it.
Good to see you up here.
So I think there was another question, and you'd also added the person, but yeah.
Yeah, Chandeep was up here, but he retreated. I'm not sure. It's
Yes.
good to see you, man.
Right. So I think, Jay, then we are towards the end. Any closing thoughts you want to have?
Well, why don't we? Chandeep is coming up again, so we'll give him a chance to speak, and then we can close out.
Sure.
Hey, Chandeep, good to see you, my friend.
Hello, greetings. Just want to say hello, but I retreated to give Tia the opportunity. So yeah.
Sure. Hey, well, I did say that. I said come up to say hi. It's good to see you. Have you been raiding the Twitter Spaces as often as before?
No, I've just been super busy working. Teaching in a university as well, on top of the other things I was doing. So super busy. And today I was at a event where you present at the university with the kind of exhibition stands with a view to hiring people and having those conversations. But here it is. It's 1 a.m. It's been a long day.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming up and saying hi. I met Chandeep in some Twitter Spaces on Twitter, which is, again, another reason to try Twitter. I know a lot of people don't think of Twitter as kind of a career space, but a lot of professionals use Twitter. It's interesting because it's more of like a real-time platform. Like people on LinkedIn, if you post, maybe people go to LinkedIn once a week. But people that are on Twitter every day. So if you're able to connect with the tech community on Twitter, you get like real-time feedback almost, right? Like people that are on Twitter are always on Twitter. So it's a powerful community, if you've never joined. So think about it. The only key is make sure you follow the right people. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of garbage content, which, Twitter's kind of famous for. All right, so we are at time. I want to thank everybody for being here. Hopefully the session was valuable to you. Sahil, thank you so much for hosting with me today. Really appreciate you doing that. One of the things that we do at MentorMesh, though, is I always talk about mentorship is leadership. These events, hosting spaces like this, hosting events, talking at events, especially if you're somebody that's interested in product, guess what? You're going to do a lot of talking. You're going to do a lot of presenting. So you might as well start doing that now, because the key to a lot of that really is just practice. You just got to do it. The more confident you feel, the more prepared you feel, the more experience you have doing it, the better you're going to be at it. So we have a lot of people that will come from the community and help me do spaces. Get comfortable. It's only terrifying the first few times, and after a while you realize, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody is human, and if you do make a mistake, don't worry. People will forget about it in like 30 minutes, so it's not that big a deal. All right. Well, thank you, Sahil, again. Thank you, everybody, for being here. If you can make the town hall, it's tomorrow morning. Sahil, do you have any final words?
No, thanks, Jay, for inviting me to host the space. I think I loved it, and I think people had a lot of fun. And folks, let's come and meet at the town hall again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. PST. That's it.
Absolutely. All right, very cool. Well, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help if I can. My inbox gets kind of full, but if I can, I'll try to answer. But come to the town hall. You're going to meet a lot more people. MentorMesh has got a vibe. You need support. We all need support and growth. So if you don't have people, come show up and meet some people. All right, hopefully I'll see all you folks tomorrow. Have a good night.
Bye, folks.